So I just want to take a couple of minutes to talk about some of the logical issues and philosophical issues raised by former President Trump's now notorious conversation with the National Association of Black Journalists. And I'm going to bypass, things that I think are kind of obnoxious and rude that he does and all of that stuff, and try to zero in on some of the things that he does that I think suggest that he's not a great candidate because of the quality of his thinking and his inability to respond to questions in a meaningful way. So here's the first interesting and problematic question, mainly, from a political as well as from a philosophical perspective.
Here, some of your own supporters, including Republicans on Capitol Hill, have labeled Vice President Kamala Harris, who is the first Black and Asian American woman to serve as vice president and be on a major party ticket, as a DEI hire. Is that acceptable language to you? And will you tell those Republicans and those supporters to stop it?
How do you define DEI? Go ahead. How do you define
diversity, equity, inclusion?
Okay, yeah, go ahead. Is that what your definition?
Give me
a definition then. Would you give me a definition
DEI.
of that? Give me a definition.
Sir, I'm asking you a question,
No,
a
you
very
have to
direct
define
question.
it. Define it for me, if you
I
would.
just defined it, sir. Do you believe that Vice President Kamala Harris is only on the ticket because she is a Black woman?
Well, I can say no. I think it's maybe a little bit different. So
He does, and he goes on. We'll talk about what the rest of his response. But the first thing to notice is just pretty straightforwardly that it's his campaign and people in his campaign and his supporters in Congress and elsewhere who are calling it a DEI hire. So to ask the person asking him the question about the language that they're using to define it is to shift the burden in an illegitimate kind of way. If your campaign is using that term, you should know what you mean by it, and you should be prepared to say what you mean by it. And his unwillingness to do that is just him dodging the way that DEI is a racial code. And it's even clearer when she says, is she the candidate because she's Black? And he doesn't say, oh, is that what you mean by DEI, or any of that stuff. He knows exactly what she means. He just wants her to say it, because then he doesn't have to say it. And then he can just answer the question that he's been asked about whether she's a quote-unquote DEI hire. And so then he goes on, instead of just saying, yes, I think she's a DEI hire, he takes that opportunity to not claim that she's a DEI hire, but to claim that on the basis of her being a racial candidate, she's the wrong racial candidate.
Well, I've known her a long time indirectly, not directly very much, and she was always of Indian heritage, and she was only promoting Indian heritage. I didn't know.
What do you mean, promoting Indian heritage? Because that's what people do, is they promote themselves as Indian. So it's like false advertising, essentially.
She was Black until a number of years ago when she happened to turn Black, and now she wants to be known as Black. So I don't know, is she Indian or is she Black?
She is.
Can we just take a second to acknowledge that the ABC reporter here, whose name is escaping me, doesn't bat an eyelash. She's like stone cold. That's good. That's professional work right there. So his accusation is, and by the way, if you don't know Rachel Dolezal, Dolezal, she's the famous case here of someone who claimed to be Black, who isn't. Also apparently claimed to be Afro-Caribbean or Cuban or Puerto Rican maybe. There's a kind of Latina dimension. And she's now the kind of poster child for right-wing attacks on, racial identity, politics kinds of things. And her name has been raised by people complaining about Harris's understanding of herself as Black. And so his argument here is that she used to be South Asian, now she's Black. What happened? which is just factually not true. And the reporter's about to answer this.
Always
But you know
identified
what?
as a black
I
woman. She went to a
respect either
historically black
one.
college.
I respect either choice she makes, but can't she just pick a lane and stay in it, basically, because your racial identity is a lane you have to stay in.
I respect either one, but she obviously doesn't.
All right, so there's a kind of manufacturing of her having changed her identity to black in order to get the black vote. And that's a kind of implied opportunism on her part, that she's only black because now she can get the black vote, whereas before she was Indian and that was what she was using to get where she's going, right? And so it's all kind of sideways and underhanded, and he won't say anything outright about what she's done. He'll just claim that he has better values than she does, and because these shifts are immoral and opportunistic in ways that he himself mostly is.
Because she was Indian all the way, and then all of a sudden she...
All the way, like she had put all her money in Indian. Like that's kind of what all the way means here, that she was committed to that as her political identity. And now she switches. So it's like flip-flopping on abortion, or flip-flopping on the border, or flip-flopping on criminal prosecutions, which ought to be an issue for Kamala, and apparently isn't really yet.
made a turn, and she became a black person.
Just to be clear, sir, do
And
you
I
believe
think,
that
I think
she is
somebody should look into that too when you
Someone should look into that. What? Again, it's his whole, like, investigate my opponent's thing.
ask, continue in a very hostile, nasty tone.
And now the woman is nasty, of course, just like Hillary Clinton was nasty. And of course, he doesn't talk about women this way. He just doesn't.
a direct question, sir? Do you believe that Vice President Kamala Harris is a DEI hire, as some
I really
Republicans have
don't know.
said?
I mean, I really don't know. Could be. There are.
Could be. Don't know. So they put the reporters in the position of stating his actual claim, which he can then claim to have no opinion on. And yet, there he is, facing down the liberal media establishment, and getting at the truth and getting them to speak the truth, rhetorically speaking.
There are some, and there are plenty. I know this lady right over there, Harris, is a fantastic person who just interviewed me at length.
Okay, wait. I want you to notice the shift here because it's super interesting. So she says, I'm going to run it back. She says, is Kamala a DEI hire? And he's going to say, well, I don't know. Clearly some people are. Why, Harris Faulkner over there, she's great. So presumably you're saying she was not a DEI hire? So, but he doesn't say what's the logical connection between his claim that there are DEI hires and his gesturing towards Harris Faulkner, who is a reporter from Fox News, and saying she's amazing, she's awesome. Because unlike the DEI hires, she's a good reporter. Unlike the nasty woman right in front of him, who's probably a DEI hire for a fake news network, Harris is a legitimate hire, a good reporter working for the right network. But it's a very, very odd kind of segue that really just gets him out of the question by bringing Harris Faulkner into the conversation. And so he never has to say one way or another what this reporter is trying to get him to say. He just never has to answer the question. And he doesn't even say it's a bad question. He just asks ridiculous questions that he himself should have the answers to if his people are using the words that they are in fact using. So they should be willing to say what they mean by it instead of coding it.
Question, sir. Do you believe that Vice President Kamala Harris is a DEI hire, as some
I
Republicans
really
have
don't know.
said?
I mean, I really don't know. Could be. There are some, and there are plenty. I know this lady right over there, Harris, is a fantastic person who just interviewed.
Right. I know there are many DEI hires, and there are some, he wants to say there are some exceptions. There are some black people who get hired just on the basis of their qualifications. And he turns to his friend. I mean, she's the friendly reporter on the stage, which is fine. Like, I don't reject him having a friendly reporter on the stage. But he basically throws his lifeline to her, and she grabs it. You know, and she does, by the way, just to be clear, she asks good questions in this panel.
Me at length, and we had a great interview, I think, and I heard you got very good ratings on that.
Well,
interview.
you told me it was the longest one of your life, so we had a good discussion. Look, I want to talk about why you're here today. I mean, it is not lost on us how divided we are as a country. And as you were coming today, we really got to see that we are divided along the lines of race, along the lines of gender,
And here you get, that's not me, that's the recording. So, you know, and he's complaining, and also Harris is complaining all throughout it that the sound's bad. And clearly that was the problem at the beginning, was there were some problems with the sound, and they didn't get them fixed. Which is really unfortunate for a professional news network.
And there is this question of, in this moment where we are, why come here? What is your message today?
My message is to stop people from invading our country.
So that's your message to black journalists and black voters, is that they need to get on board with stopping people from, quote, invading our country, by which he means immigration. So he's attempting to mobilize black voters to vote for him on the basis that they need to keep out the other brown people who are coming into the country illegally and taking their jobs. Now, the question of what that means, like their jobs, is going to come up later, and we'll talk about that too. But the rhetorical move here is to pit black voters, potential black voters, against the other enemy, an enemy outside. And so they can join me, and together we'll fight the enemy of the entire country if you're on my side, and it'll make your life better.
That are taking, frankly, a lot of problems with it. But one of the big problems, and a lot of the journalists in this room I know and I have great respect for, a lot of the journalists in this room are black. I will tell you.
At the National Association of Black Journalists meeting, shockingly, a lot of the journalists are black. All right, whatever.
That coming from the border are millions and millions of people that happen to be taking black jobs.
Oh, here we go. They're taking black jobs. They're taking low-skill jobs, low-wage jobs, jobs that nobody wants, which is in fact often the case, especially with illegal workers doing farm jobs for almost no money and constantly at risk of being deported by, the border police, the INS, or ICE. He says black jobs. They're taking black jobs. So this then is his appeal, is that if the immigrants are taking black jobs, they're pouring over the border in an invasion. Never mind, actually, that Biden's deportation count has long since surpassed the deportation count under Trump. But there's this massive invasion at the border of people who are taking black jobs. And so if you vote for me, I can shut down the border, and those jobs will be there for you, the black voter who voted for me.
You had the best.
What exactly is a black job, sir?
A black job is anybody that has a job.
Wait, what? Okay, so here he's in a position that clearly no one has prepared him for. If he's going to say they're taking black jobs, he needs to know what that means. And it's just like the DEI thing, right? He's saying, well, tell me what a DEI is. What do you mean? But define DEI for me, or I can't answer your question. And here, because he's the one calling them black jobs, he just called them black jobs, then he's right then and there on the hook and can't get out. So when they ask him what a black job is, he has to say something. And the best he can come up with is anyone who has a job. Okay, never mind that anyone isn't a job. But what it means is a job that anyone has. So essentially, he's arguing that any jobs are black jobs. So they're not just taking black jobs; they're taking any jobs at all. And of course, that's what he should have here is an actual way of talking coherently about what he means by black jobs. Where are blacks employed most predominantly? Like what sectors of employment? What are the wages for black workers? How can you improve those? How can you expand the opportunities for black workers into areas where black workers tend to be underemployed, unemployed, or underpaid? How do you, like all of those things? And he addresses none of those things. Instead, he says immigrants are taking black jobs. What are black jobs? Those are just jobs. So immigrants are taking jobs. Okay, but there's nothing in there specifically for black journalists or black voters. And so my point here is not like all the kind of tone things about him and all of the like, kind of racist attitudes or gender attitudes or any of that stuff. Is looking at the ways that he talks and what he has to say for himself, and it's a mishmash of incoherent chatter, both about Kamala personally, and then about him in these kind of economic terms that he either doesn't understand, which I honestly suspect, or is unwilling and or unable to talk about.
That's what it is. Anybody that has a job.
All right.
And they take.
And you hear the laughter because everybody knows instantly that that's a cop-out, that that's a dodge, that that's a failure to ask the question, to answer the question.
President,
They're taking the employment away from black people. They're coming in, they're invading.
They're taking the employment away from black people, but when you ask them, like he can't say where that is. Like, in what ways are they taking more jobs from black people than from anyone else? Maybe they're taking fewer jobs from black people than they're taking from anyone else. He just doesn't know. Or possibly he's lying, but I suspect he thinks it's true-ish. But it's clearly not a very sophisticated understanding of the situation for someone who wants to be a president and claims to be able to fix the economy and improves the lives of black voters, never mind anybody else.
It's an invasion of millions of people, probably 15, 16, 17 million people. I have a feeling it's
What?
much more than that. And everybody's been seeing what's happened. The first group of people, the black population, is affected most by that. And Kamala is allowing it to happen. She's the border czar. She's the worst border czar in the history of the world. There's never been a border czar like this. She's never even...
See, anyone with any actual preparation would be able to say where and how much, not just that he just spouts kind of ranges of numbers of immigrants illegally across the border, but that he says that blacks are most affected. He keeps saying the black population, which just feels like someone who's so uncomfortable in his skin. And I register discomfort, like it's fine to be uncomfortable with this stuff, but you're running for president and you need to find a way to be comfortable with what you're saying and who you're talking to if you want those people to vote for you. So here he ought to, what I would really like to have seen from him is, where are these jobs, like what jobs precisely are immigrants taking? And specifically, what jobs are they taking from black Americans, from black citizens?
Someone from Illinois, an unarmed black woman, was shot the other day in her home by a deputy sheriff. The deputy has since been charged with murder. You've said police would get immunity from prosecution if you win. Why should someone like that officer have immunity, in your opinion?
Immunity?
Immunity.
I don't know the exact case, but I...
Does it matter? The question is about granting police immunity, and you're presented with a case where clearly someone shouldn't have immunity, and in fact he's been charged. and instead you waffle about the details of the case. And for someone who wants to be president to not know about this case is, you know, is a pretty serious failing.
Saw something, and it didn't look good to me.
Oh, it didn't look good. Yeah.
Didn't look good to me. Are you talking with the water, right?
Yeah, well, police unions are not backing this person either.
Okay.
But again, why would...
They're going to be charging the officer. I guess they're charging the officer.
So why should he receive immunity?
Well, he might not. I mean, it depends. It depends on what happens. I'm talking about people that are much different cases than that. We need people to protect ourselves. And by the way, in Chicago, as an example, a few weeks ago, July 4th week.
If it depends on the case, then that's not immunity. So I'm not sure what you're saying.
They had 117 shootings and 17 deaths. Nobody wants that. Nobody wants that. We need to have our police officers have the respect and dignity back. In this particular case, I saw something that didn't look good to me. I didn't like it.
So the problem is the problem with police shooting people is that they don't have their respect and dignity. That seems to be his answer to the problem here. And that is at best tone deaf. You know, given the case that's being described and the question that she's asking about it. Again, it's a dodge. It's just dodging. And it never answers the question about his promise to give police immunity.
I didn't like it at all.
So can you get
It just says he didn't like it. Okay.
a little more specific back to the immunity question? Who would make those
Well, right now,
distinctions?
for the most part, people are protected by their unions, by their police unions, or by their police departments. But I'm saying if I felt, or if a group of people would feel that somebody was being unfairly prosecuted because the person did a good job maybe with crime, or made a mistake, an innocent mistake. There's a big difference between being a bad person and making an innocent mistake.
And so he makes this distinction between being a bad person and making an innocent mistake. And two things happen here. One, it makes it all about the individual and not at all about the cultures in which they operate. And in this case, it's really remarkable that the police union is not sticking up for this guy. Because, you know, the thin blue line, right? Like, cops stand together. And if they're not here, that's pretty striking, actually. But he makes it both personal, about what a specific individual did without acknowledging that that individual is acting within a certain context, and that context seems to promote individuals behaving the way that individual behaved. And the second thing is that he makes a distinction between being a bad person and making an innocent mistake, and then without ever claiming that it was an innocent mistake, he uses that distinction to get himself off the hook for saying what he's going to do here. So suddenly the conversation is about that distinction instead of about what he would do.
But if somebody made an innocent mistake, I would want to help that person.
What would those exceptions be? What would determine
You
an
go
innocent
after
mistake?
somebody, and it's a very close call, and it's very dangerous. And you know, they have the policeman's life and woman is a very difficult thing, because sometimes you have less than a second to make a life and death decision, and sometimes very bad decisions are made. They're not made from an evil.
Well, right. They may not be made from evil. But this is where the question is not an individual question. It's a question about the culture. It's a question about how police are trained, and that that he shot her in the head 3 times. Not in the arm, not like the shoulder, in the head 3 times. That was his go-to move in a situation like that. Not a non-lethal weapon, not running. Just get out. and then deal with the situation when the danger has become lower. Like if she was actually going to throw the water at him, like let her, like he can't outrun this woman, like, you know, shut the door on her. Like there are lots of things they could have done besides shoot her in the head 3 times. And by the way, you know, if you watch the Staircase documentary about the guy who allegedly pushed his wife down the stairs to kill her, and they make the case that he was beating her over the head with a blowpoke. And the lead prosecutor in his closing arguments says that he struck her multiple times, and he makes the claim in those closing arguments that those moments between the first blow and the second blow make it premeditation. Now, I think that's I think that's ridiculous. But when you've got a cop shooting a woman not once, not twice, but 3 times in the head, who is, you know, unarmed, but maybe with some dangerously hot water, to be fair, is the answer to shoot her in the head 3 times. And if that's the answer, then we're screwed.
Standpoint, but they're made from the standpoint of they made a mistake.
So I want to follow up really quickly. You know, I find it interesting because you do talk about reining in prosecutors, especially when it comes to prosecutors that are prosecuting you. Why doesn't that skepticism apply to law enforcement?
Well, I've been prosecuted because I'm a political opponent of 2 people that have weaponized our justice system. I've been prosecuted. I just won the big case in Florida. Everyone said that was the biggest case.
To say he won that case is a little misleading. He wasn't exonerated. It became about the appointment of the special prosecutor. And at the end of the day, that doesn't mean anything about whether or not he should pay for that stuff.
That was the most difficult case, and I just won it. Now, Biden has a similar case, except much worse. I was protected under the Presidential Records Act. Biden wasn't, because he wasn't president at the time, and he had 50 years' worth of documents, and they ruled that he was incompetent, and therefore he shouldn't stand trial.
Okay, no, that's not what happened. It's just not. It's true. Now I'm forgetting the guy's name who did that investigation, and he said, yeah, it just seems like he's a well-meaning, forgetful old man. But that's not, which is problematic for a person who goes on to be president. But it's not being ruled legally incompetent and so unable to stand trial. And that was exactly not what that report said, right? And so even quite apart from that, he's kind of dodging the issue about how he feels about unrestricted police power, which is kind of on the nose because, you know, groups like the Proud Boys, all the people wearing their like blue stripe flags and all of that stuff are the people who are, on the one hand, you know, resisting the jackbooted thugs, and that's why they need their guns. And at the same time, they're the people who are on the side of the police. And, you know, of course, the police are the jackbooted thugs. And so there is this really interesting kind of contradiction at the heart of it. And I'm not making fun of that. I think it's a problem. But, like, there's a fascination with the military militarization, military power, that makes their fear is related to their admiration, and their admiration is related to their fear.
Well, and I said, isn't that something? He's incompetent and he can't stand trial, and yet he can be president. Isn't that nice?
Mr. President,
but they released him on the basis that he was incompetent. They said he had no memory, and he was a nice old guy, but he had no memory, and therefore we're not going to prosecute him. I won the case, and it got very little publicity. I didn't notice ABC doing any publicity on it, George.
We covered you extensively, sir. I'd love to move over on to different topics.
I didn't notice you do
That's actually kind of a good one, George Slobogopoulos. I mean, it's annoying, but it's also a good one.
any publicity on it at all. I won the case.
I mean, as, racist ways of making fun of Greek names go.
Mr. President, I would love to ask you about January 6th. You've called yourself the candidate of law and order.
Yeah.
When Time Magazine asked you if you would consider pardoning all the rioters, you said, yes, absolutely.
Sure.
You called them patriots. 140 police officers were assaulted that day. Their injuries included broken bones, at least one officer lost an eye, one had 2 cracked ribs, 2 smashed spinal discs, another had a stroke. Were the people who assaulted those 140 officers, including those I just mentioned, patriots who deserve pardons?
Well, let me bring it back to modern day. Like about 5 days ago, we had an attack on the Capitol, a horrible attack on the Capitol. You saw the people that were protesting and spraying these incredible monuments, bells, lions, all these magnificent limestone and granite with red paint, red spray paint that will never actually come off, especially on the limestone. It will never, I'm a builder, I know about this stuff. It'll never, you'll see it in 100 years from now. They viciously attacked our government. They fought with police. They fought with them much more openly than I saw on January 6th.
What? How can you listen to that list of the hurt police officers and say, like, I don't even know how to deal with this. The most important thing is that it's dodging the question, right? It's not a matter of, comparing it to this and this and this. It's a matter of your commitment to police. And so it comes back to the point that I was making earlier, right? Like, on the one hand, the police are the good guys, and yet at the same time, they are the bad guys. And it's a problem right here, right? So the cops investigating him are bad, the cops on his side are good. It's got nothing to do with whether, for him, it's got nothing to do with whether they're police or not. It's got to do with whose side they're on. And so the police defending the Capitol on January 6th were wrong, and therefore they got what they deserved. And the people who were attacking them were right, and therefore should not be punished. That seems, frankly, to be his logic. I don't think I'm even misstating or distorting what the distinction is that he's making here. And it's the same as the distinction he made about the documents and so on. There's me, I'm right. I don't mind the police because I was prosecuted politically, not criminally. And so it's about whether it was right or not, and not about the structures of the police and how they work.
What's going to happen to those people? What's going to happen to the people in Portland that destroyed that city?
But sir, my question is on those.
What's going to happen to the people that tried to
My question is on those
bring
rioters who assaulted officers.
You have to
would you pardon those people?
What's going to happen? Oh, absolutely, I would.
And there you have it, right? Like, he's going to pardon them, despite the fact, like, how can you? I don't understand how police unions can be in support of this, right? Except that their ideology, their sort of pro-Trump ideology, is taking over. Like, I really don't know, because what he's saying is that, cops on the wrong side are cut loose. They don't get, and this is maybe goes back to the immunity thing. If they're going to be trouble for him, if they're working against him, he cuts them loose. And he'll take the side against them. If they're on his side, he will pardon them. And so would this police officer, in the case in Illinois, be granted immunity? I don't know, but almost certainly by him, or pardoned. And here, in the case of the cops at the Capitol on January 6th, he's prepared to cut them loose. And the sort of left and right-wing attitudes towards the police are fraught, to say the least. But I'm not the one who wants to arm everybody and then have, shootouts with the cops at the Capitol on January 6th.
If they're innocent, I would pardon them.
They've been convicted.
And by the way, the
They've been convicted.
court just under, well, they were convicted by a very tough system.
A very tough system, by which he means they're out to get Trump.
How come the people that tried to burn down Minneapolis, how come the people that took over a large percentage of Seattle, how come nothing happened to them? How come the
but
people
sir, we're
that,
talking about people that were seen beating officers
we're talking about
with flagpoles,
buildings.
dragging them down the stairs. They're on video. Have you seen that video, sir?
Oh, really? Well, they
you would
shot.
pardon those. You would pardon those rioters?
They shot a young lady in the face who was protesting. They shot her in the face. You know, nobody died that day. You do know that. But people died in Seattle. No.
They shot a young lady in the face who was protesting. The cops did, apparently. You know, in striking contrast to the woman in Illinois who was shot 3 times in the head. So in that case, well, you have to think whether it's an honest mistake. But in this case, it's cops fighting off people who should have been in the Capitol, and so they're bad people, and you don't let them off the hook.
Nobody died, but people died in Minneapolis. You know, people died in Minneapolis,
that day.
and nothing happens, and nobody ever talks, and nothing happens.
This is all the whataboutism stuff, and that's probably a subject for a video, whataboutism. Because, you know, comparison in principle is reasonable, but to say you shouldn't hold people accountable for things because other people get away with those things is, you need a structure within which to make that make sense.
To those people, but you went after the J6 people with a...
And J6 is totally an insider way of talking about it.
Vengeance. And I'll tell you what about the cops that were, and I'm all for the police, as you know.
I'm all for the police, except for the ones who were defending the Capitol. But otherwise, all for the police.
But what about the police that are ushering everybody into the Capitol?
Oh, right. So there were some cops who were on the right side. There were some cops who were helping those people get in, and they were on the right side.
Go in. What about that? Look,
No one was
nothing is perfect in life, but you have people from Minneapolis, you have people just from 5 days ago in Washington, D.C. They were having fistfights and fighting with the police. They were spraying and destroying, they were desecrating our monuments in Washington, D.C. 5 days ago, and nothing happened to them. And you can't have 2 systems of justice. That's why.
See, this is the thing. Like, yeah, no, you can't. You can't have 2 systems of justice. That's absolutely true. But the way he plays this, that becomes a kind of, you know, Rorschach blot for what you think of as the 2 systems of justice and how you understand its workings. And here, the way he's talking about 2 systems of justice is that he feels that the people who are on the right side are getting punished when they shouldn't, and the people who are on the wrong side are not getting punished when they should. And what we don't want is a system of justice that is one system, but the system is people on your side don't get punished and people on the other side do. And so we need to find another way of thinking about this. Well, I mean, honestly, I think we have another way of thinking about this. But, you know, what we're in the process of right now is trying to fight the ways in which the 2 systems that he's talking about are actually the way the system operates, but it's not his J6 compatriots or the Proud Boys or the very good people in Charlottesville who are the ones who are actually paying the price for that. And I think it's very difficult to imagine the January 6 riots that were mainly people of color going off as that there would not have been deaths. It's just hard for me to imagine. Maybe that's pessimistic, but I think it's true.
They went after me as a political opponent.
Yeah, you went after your vice president. They went after your vice president. Notice Pence gets no play here. So, just to wrap this, I'm trying to not focus on all of the annoying, obnoxious, frankly racist, misogynist things that he does, and instead like watch how he bobs and weaves, how he fails to answer questions, how his answers are at best, when he does give anything even close to an answer, it's very vague, very non-specific. I'm going to close the borders. I'm going to, and I'm wondering actually, I honestly do wonder how that's actually going to work. And, I'm going to drill, and I'm going to lower inflation and fix energy and all those things I'm going to do on the first day. But it's not like it's claiming too much with not enough specificity. Thanks for your time.
Elon Musk endorsed me, and he's
Sorry, that's a good one.